My name's Jonas. I'm carrying the wheel. Thanks for all you shown us. This is how we feel. Come sit next to me, pour yourself some tea. Just like Grandma made when couldn't find sleep. Things were better then, once but never again. We've all left the den and typewriter. Choo-choo train left right on time. A ticket costs only your mind. Driver said, hey man, we go all the way. Of course we were willing to pay. Something about the rules you attract. Don't tell me that you made it up. We can always screw with the facts. Don't tell me that I've seen enough. Cause if I saw nothing, why would I look twice?
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, April 23, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, now we know why he can afford to be so boring on the radio. Sean Hannity, a flip this foreclosure king. Meanwhile, efforts to stop torture guru Gina Haspel as CIA chief grow. Indiana teachers now could go on strike despite the anti-strike laws in their state. Meanwhile, Macron arrive et États-Unis. SCOTUS primed to rule on Trump's Muslim ban. National Security Chief Bolton just quit an anti-Muslim think tank. And Trump's favorite doctor / VA nominee may get blocked. And as Yemen teeters, actually, I think it's probably already teetered off into disaster. 20 killed in a Saudi-backed raid. The DNC sues a lot of folks, I guess. And Wisconsin leads the way in going backwards. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it is another week in the news, in the era of Trump. A lot of insanity. I'm still not sure what I feel about this DNC suit. For those people who are skeptical as to whether their servers were actually hacked, this would be a good way to find out, because the DNC will be subject to discovery, theoretically, in this process. They sued, the DNC sued, I think it was the Nixon administration, the Nixon campaign after Watergate. Did you know that, Matt?
I was not aware of that, no.
Yeah, they sued him, I think, for $1 million. I mean, theoretically, right, there is should be a monetary consumption. I'm not sure how much I appreciate them suing WikiLeaks. As skeptical as I've become over that enterprise as of late, it's still. I mean, I guess it really sort of is a function of their role in this, but I don't know if I like the idea of any type of journalistic outlet, even as skeptical as I have become of WikiLeaks being sued.
But suing, like, they want to put Julian Assange in prison.
Well, the DNC doesn't have the ability to put Julian Assange in prison.
The same people do.
Well, I don't know if I mean, I don't know. Maybe they want him to go to prison, but they're not in a position to put him in prison. I mean, I think these people who work at the DNC have nothing to do with law enforcement. And the question is whether or not you want an entity suing, any more than I want Peter Thiel suing Gawker. Do I want the DNC suing WikiLeaks? But in terms of suing Russia and the Trump campaign, I don't know. It seems like perhaps a waste of money, but they think they have some type of action, and I guess we'll see. Let's hear from Tom Perez, who, again, he may personally want Julian Assange in jail, but he's not in a position to do anything about it.
I mean the Democratic Party establishment at large.
I guess. I mean, all right. Well, here is Tom Perez.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question that apparently came up on a conference call that you had with some state party leaders, and this was from Slate. It said, I just mentioned this to a county. This is referring to somebody, we don't know who it was on the call, but a state party official. I just mentioned this to a county chair, and her response was, how can we spend all that money? So can you address that, the financial burden that's going to be on us? I will ask, this is going to cost the DNC. How much money are you taking away from 2018 to focus on 2016 in Russia?
Chuck, we can't afford not to do this, because when you look ahead and you see what was done before and what they're trying to do again, our democracy is at stake. It's hard to win elections when you have interference in elections. We've been winning elections. We know how to walk and chew gum. We've got boots on the ground right now in Arizona. We have a great candidate. She's an undeniable underdog. We're fighting there. We just won in Wisconsin.
You didn't answer. How much money is this lawsuit going to take this year? Millions?
I don't know. I don't know the amount of money that it will take, but I'll tell you, it's hard to put a price tag on preserving democracy. And you know what? That's why I concluded that it would be irresponsible of me not to do this.
I mean, ultimately, it's going to be easier to put a price tag on it when you find out how much it's going to cost and you pay out the lawyers. They have been winning elections, at least since 2016, but it does seem to me, I mean, I wouldn't donate for that money unless there can be some type of return. I'm not sure how much money do they think they're going to win that's going to convince Russia to not do that again. I'm not quite clear I understand what the theory is behind it, but they did sue, after Watergate. There is an analog here on some level. I mean, I don't necessarily, you wouldn't sue the WikiLeaks.
Would it be just for monetary damages, or is there something where the DNC just wants to air some stuff and get them out in the open?
That's the only other thing, is that you wonder if this isn't all about discovery. I mean, it goes both ways. Obviously, for those who are skeptical as to whether or not they were actually hacked, the DNC has got to provide all they will, presumably attorneys from the other side will say, we want to see all the server records, all of it. But presumably, too, through a discovery in this instance, there may be things that have to be revealed on the other side that there is some value in that they may anticipate. I guess we will find out.
I think you saw in your conversation with Cliff a couple weeks ago that Russia is much higher on the list of priorities for establishment Democrats than it is for the base. I forget exactly what it was that they traded for sanctions on Russia in one legislative session. I need to look it up, but it was something that a lot more people care about. And it's just they're going to ride this forever, I think.
I mean, look, I just think that I don't think that we can really tell what the logic is behind this, because you would have to be completely tone deaf to to go forward with this suit, knowing you're going to spend money and not have any type of strategy on where it leads? Right now, it's possible they have none, but I mean, Tom Perez is not an idiot, and so I don't know. I will reserve judgment as to whether or not there is any value to this. It seems to me, I would think it's a waste of money, but like I say, maybe there's something in discovery that they think they're going to find, whether it's with Russia or with the Trump. I mean, the story, because people like to focus on the Russia aspect but maybe the whole point of it is more about there's an element in the Trump administration the Trump campaign that they think has value. So I don't know.
When people think our democracy is under threat, I feel like they're more likely to get in line and support the party line. But I guess we'll see.
It'd be nice if we could get the people who would pay for like the McCabe crowdfunding thing to also bankroll this thing.
Yes, indeed. Nutrafol is a new, safe, and effective strategy to help you take control of your hair health. It's made with 100% drug-free nutraceutical ingredients, clinically shown to improve thinning hair. It's recommended by over 850 top physicians, some of the top salons in the country. Some folks actually report better sleep and digestion, too. It's available in 2 distinct formulas for men and for women to suit your specific metabolic needs. Go to Nutrafol.com to learn more. You can get your first month's supply with a subscription for $10 at Nutrafol.com. Use the promo code MAJORITY during checkout. That's Nutrafol, Nutrafol.com. Offer code MAJORITY to get your first month's supply for $10 with subscription. Apparently, it's not just genetics that have it out for your hair. Stress, DHT levels, diet, and environmental toxins all have been discovered to compromise hair health. Whatever the cause is, you're catching your reflection in the mirror and you're concerned. Michael's not here today. Maybe you've tried the drug on the market. Maybe you're interested in something that's 100% drug-free, leveraging the latest, greatest in biotech. Nutrafol's botanical ingredients are shown to improve hair without compromising sexual health or any other kind. In fact, one of Nutrafol's key ingredients, Sol palmetto, has been shown to support healthier libido. That is Nutrafol.com. Offer code MAJORITY. Folks, as you know, I just got back, I guess it was a week ago, but whenever I travel, I hit my Texture app like no business. And are you paying attention? Look, and I will be the first to admit that this program narrowly focused on politics. I mean, it's sort of like me. I have people in my life who are just on a daily basis astonished at how little I know about outside of these parameters. Like, I can't even remember the name of the guy, or like it was something, music.
Cardi B?
Yeah, Cardi B came up, and I was like, yeah, I vaguely have heard of Cardi B just in the past week because of Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. That's it. But Beyonce, apparently, she's really big now.
Yep, now she's big.
Huge. And I just found out she was married to Jay-Z.
She was.
Is she still?
She still is, yep.
Okay, well, there you go. See, I'm learning. But look, there's also a middle ground between there and there, which is what I like about Texture, because I end up reading a bunch of magazines that I keep saying I've got to read, but I don't. You get it all with Texture. It's the app that covers over 200 top magazines all in one place. With Texture, you get complete issues and back issues for things like Time, The Atlantic, The New Yorker, Family Handyman. Go back, learn how to make the perfect trim. If you want something lighter, you got People, Cosmo, Entertainment Weekly. Texture delivers the best of both worlds, newsworthy stories and relaxing entertainment anytime, anywhere. Magazines are where you find the best journalism, best photographs, in-depth interviews, perspectives that show you all sides of the story. Deep dive into issues you care about today with Texture. It's usually $9.99 a month, but they're giving our listeners a free trial. You can start your 7-day free trial. Go to texture.com/majority. That's texture.com/majority. Start reading the latest issues of your favorite magazines. Texture.com/majority. All right, folks, let's dive into this. This is a pretty disturbing story. So if there are kids who are listening, young children, maybe it's time just to like skip ahead 6 or 7 minutes because this is people know I abhor violence of any type, even if it's against someone like Milo Yiannopoulos. And I just was reading his Facebook post and I was very upset. I want to read this. This is just from 19 hours ago. Maybe a little more now. I was just shoved and screamed at by a big group in a pub in Manhattan and forced out of the place. My God. Shoved? Screamed at? One of them was a reporter for Gizmodo. Jesus.
Antifa news outlet.
Oh, my God. They were screaming at the top of their lungs about Nazis and KKK. This sounds like a complete cacophony, and the shoving and the screaming. Initially, I was going to stay put, but obviously they blocked me from my table and my bag. They try and take his bag? And they yelled at me to leave. And it was just about to escalate into something ugly. It sounds like it was ugly. I mean, if he's been shoved, it rattled me a little bit, just slightly. Perhaps because I have something to lose in life now. Wow.
I don't know.
My first thought was John and not getting myself hurt or killed. I think that's his husband. Wow. This was so harrowing that it made him think about losing his own life and leaving his husband. I don't know how I'd explain to my black husband that I got hurt for being a white supremacist. Does he always refer to him as, does he call him Black John? I mean, and possibly he wouldn't have the opportunity to explain because it sounds like his life was threatened here. I didn't have security with me. Jesus. That's classic. Forget you go to the pub. How many times have we all done this? Forgot to bring our security detail. So I just had to get out of there. I won't name the place we were at because the staff were really understanding and cool about it. But geez, it's now impossible for me to safely go out for lunch in most major cities in America because I supported Trump at the last election and don't like feminism. It's weird because there's so many people who supported Trump and there's a lot of people who don't like feminism. I wonder why they don't get. All right. So we apparently have footage. Folks, this sounds like it's going to be super disturbing. The shoving, the screaming, the threatening. This guy looks like his life is endangered. Here it is. Milo Yiannopoulos. Do we know the name of the bar?
It was Churchill's Pub in East 20s.
Oh, my God. Of course, that's
Churchill's
a very
Tavern.
dangerous area. Churchill's Tavern in East 20s. Here it is.
Nazi scum, get out! Nazi scum, get out! Nazi scum, get out! Nazi scum, get out!
Pause it. Now, this must have been before the shoving, right? Because he's just standing there calmly, apparently. And it's unclear to me whether or not that's just the patrons there or if it's also the staff.
And some passersby in the street.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. But this must be way before the shoving because he seems totally calm. Go ahead.
Nazi scum, get out! 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 Nazi scum, get out!
Oh, they're getting their bags from the checkout girl.
Nazi scum, get out!
And they left. That's weird.
Chilling.
Yes, and look at how they were almost blocked. They were a foot from the bar, and they asked the bartender for their backpacks back.
It's like footage from a war zone.
That is crazy. I can't believe he went through something like that. And in New York, of course, there's so few bars that he probably had to go right home and couldn't go anywhere else. And it turns out he just walked into a pub that just happened to have be full of members coming from a DSA citywide meeting.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about our info security. I feel like someone must have leaked that to him because
that seems like quite a coincidence.
Yeah, and after he'd been, getting pretty irrelevant for a while.
Yes.
So
I mean, this is, I have to say, this is the first time in probably many months I've said Milo Yiannopoulos. So,
yeah, very concerned about the InfoSec on that.
I would be a little bit concerned. And also, those people have to calm down. All of the mental shoving they did. And
his ears might have been ringing.
It's true.
I mean,
I could see how his first thought after that would be like, my husband. What would happen if I left my husband alone?
My black husband.
My black husband.
This may surprise you, but an eyewitness tells me there was no shoving.
I am not surprised after looking at that video because he seems super calm if that was after the shoving.
Also, I know these people, and they're not the most threatening group.
Well, says you. I mean, look at the way they all
You're gonna chant at somebody.
Chanted in unison. You never know. They could go to the next thing you know, they could be going up to Yankee Stadium and yelling "Yankees suck, Yankees suck" out in front of it. That would
like those Antifa people have been doing for a long time.
It's really dangerous. May 8th, apparently, Gina Haspel is slated to go in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee for her nomination as head. I'm sorry, this is May 9th. This is her confirmation hearing to be named CIA chief. Pompeo is attempting to move over to State Department. The CIA on Friday declassified and released a memo, and this is going to be shocking to you too. It apparently clears Gina Haspel of any wrongdoing in drafting an order to destroy videotaped evidence of brutal interrogation techniques, in other words, torture. This is part of a broader campaign to support her within the CIA. The memo was written by former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell in 2011 as the result of a disciplinary review in which he found no fault with the performance of Ms. Haspel, primarily because she drafted the cable on the direct orders of her superior and did not release it herself. And of course, you have senators, including Dianne Feinstein, saying it's completely unacceptable for the CIA to declassify only material that's favorable to Gina Haspel. I mean, they're the CIA. While at the same time stonewalling our efforts to declassify all documents related to her involvement in the torture program. Dianne Feinstein has seen the torture report. Very few people have. They know her role in this. They know how extensive her role in this was. There has been a document that has been signed now by, released today, by 100 retired general and flag officers of the U.S. military. We urge you to examine closely the full extent of Ms. Haspel's involvement in the rendition, detention, and interrogation program. Should you find she played any role in carrying out, supervising, or directing the torture or abuse of people in U.S. custody or the destruction of evidence relating to these activities, we urge you to reject her nomination. There are multiple uncontested reports that she ran a CIA black site prison at which at least one detainee was repeatedly tortured, including waterboarding. Former CIA General Counsel John Rizzo has stated that for some period of time, a person we now know to be Ms. Haspel oversaw CIA's entire interrogation program that was rife with mismanagement and abuse. She appears to be involved in inappropriate actions that went beyond what authorized by Congress or senior officials in the executive branch. Public reports suggest the cases of detainee abuse she supervised or otherwise had an operational role involved in conduct more abusive than what the discredited legal memo supported. She also appears to have strongly advocated for and played a key role in carrying out an order to destroy 92 videotapes of individuals in U.S. custody despite federal court orders requiring preservation of all records pertaining to detainee abuse. Now, maybe she was just following orders, which she knew was, which she had to have known, were contrary. Yeah, exactly. The idea that anybody associated with that would still be at the CIA, never mind. And of course, this happened also with Brennan, too, right? Is an epic failure of our entire body politic, particularly the Obama administration in the wake of the Bush administration. But May 9th, we will see if there is the will going forward to prevent her from. Did they do this with to prevent her from being nominated? Did they do that? Did the Democrats actually refuse to vote on Pompeo in committee? Has that been resolved yet? The idea being is there's one technique that they can use, which is to refuse to actually provide a quorum for the vote on a nominee coming out of committee. In which case, the committee cannot even offer a negative recommendation to the full Senate. In which case, the Senate has to, McConnell has to actually issue a, basically a new resolution, which then could be filibustered, is my understanding.
CNN reported 25 minutes ago Manchin joined Heitkamp in saying he'll vote for Pompeo.
On the floor or in committee?
On the floor.
Okay, so he's likely to fail the committee vote. So I guess the Democrats decided not to go this route. Because he will fail in the committee, but nevertheless, the committee will then issue a negative. This would have been a pretty big escalation of the in terms of bending Senate procedures. Let's put it that way. But
well, the Democrats never held these people accountable before. Why would they start now?
Well, the issue in this instance is whether or not they want to basically scrap the ability of the next president to even appoint anybody. They've got rid of the filibuster. The next issue would be, how would you deal with this? And I don't know if there is a fix for this. So, all right, moving on. Oh, let's talk about this for a moment. This story out of Wisconsin. And we had a little bit of technical difficulties. We're going to bring you an interview, and if we have to, we will redo this interview on basically the assault in 2010. And this gets very little focus and discussion. But so much of the money that came pouring in after Citizens United was focused on state races and state initiatives by the right in 2010. We've seen the product of some of this money in the form of the gerrymandering, but so much of it was to push an agenda, and nowhere is more indicative of this than Wisconsin. We saw it within 2 months of, maybe less, of Scott Walker being sworn into office back in 2011. They were already assaulting public sector unions. They were already assaulting the Wisconsin's version of Medicaid. And one of the things that they did over the years in Wisconsin, in 2013, Scott Walker signed legislation requiring childless adults who aren't disabled to work at least 20 hours a week to continue to qualify for food stamps. Those who didn't do so were required to attend training programs scattered throughout the state until they could find a job. In February of this year, the state took it a step further. Parents of school-age children will also have to work to receive food stamps. And instead of 20 hours, they have to work 30 hours. In February, as part of that suite of laws, too, Wisconsin passed a law prohibiting food stamp recipients from owning a car valued at more than $20,000. So the Washington Post did a story on this couple, James Howlett and Nadine. He has a Ford Fusion. He and Nadine and their 2 kids are bouncing from suburban homeless shelter to suburban homeless shelter. They drive their kids to kindergarten and daycare around the outskirts of Milwaukee. He's not sure what the value of that car is. He didn't just buy it. But the story of how they got there is pretty harrowing. Things just kept spiraling out of control for them. They lost a job, then they lost another job. There have been 9 welfare reform bills, so-called welfare reform bills, that have been passed in Wisconsin. And the purpose of this, of course, is to make sure that people with giant mansions and fancy cars don't get welfare checks while hardworking taxpayers pay the bill. Now, food stamps, on the upside, the most I think you can get is somewhere around $200 a month worth of food stamps. Since Walker put the work requirements into place, the Health Services Department said it's cut spending on food stamps by 28%, from $1.2 billion in 2013 to $867 million in 2017. 25,000 food stamp recipients out of a statewide total of 700,000 have found work. Now, something else has happened between 2013 and 2017, and that is millions of more people across the country have found work. Because the economy, while not going gangbusters, has improved marginally. And the problem with this type of welfare, so-called welfare reform, in addition to it being an incredible hardship on people who are already suffering, in addition to potentially leaving kids without food, it gets even worse when you have a downturn in the economy. So when Bill Clinton's 96 so-called welfare reform was imposed, this was on the upswing of the economy, and the idea of people getting jobs was much easier. And so they could read it as like, oh, look, it's encouraging people to work. And so for the first 2 years, it appeared like it was working properly. In 2001, there was a Labor Department study which showed that in the end, it had no implication for whether or not people got work. All it did was it meant that there was a lot more suffering. No difference in income and employment between those who were subjected to work requirements and a control group that was not. Whatever their status, though, parents still had to contend with the challenge of finding good-paying jobs and consistent hours in places where they might be limited, with less to keep them afloat in terms of providing for their children. State officials said that more than 86,000 people have lost their ability to get food stamps and did not report getting new jobs. And there's been, of course, no government study examining what happened to them, because then you'd have all of these stories of people skipping meals, of kids going without food. This is what happened to this couple. Nadine lost one cleaning job in a suburban hospital while waiting to start another 5 blocks from her apartment. Then their car broke down, and he had to cut back on his hours as a Lyft driver, and then they couldn't afford rent anymore. They tried to apply for an emergency loan from the state, but they were disqualified because they were not receiving cash assistance at the time, even though they were still eligible for food stamps. They lived in hotels until money ran out and then tried moving into a homeless shelter in Milwaukee, but it was full. They were pointed to the suburbs where they could find maybe a network of churches. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're basically just trying to make the kids seem, trying to tell the kids that everything's fine. They've sold off most of the kids' toys. They've tried to keep some. 44% in the last 6 months, 44% of participants reported gaining employment after going through a work training program. They averaged 35 hours per week at a wage of $12.88. To afford a 2-bedroom in Milwaukee, a family must work 40 hours a week at $17.83. So there have been dramatic, in the mid-1990s, in Wisconsin, 80 out of 100 families living below the poverty line in Wisconsin received cash assistance. Now it's 20 out of every 100. Meanwhile, they're going to be paying off Foxconn, what is it, billions of dollars worth of tax breaks. So that's essentially, in Milwaukee, and understand Milwaukee, in Wisconsin is the template. They would roll this stuff out in every state across the country if they could. This is where the Koch brothers started with Scott Walker, who was born and raised AFP, like the OG Koch brother surrogate. And this is the vision they want to create across the country. And to some extent, they've had decent success. They have the destruction of public sector unions, the cutting back on support for citizens, all of it. Indiana was another place. Mike Pence was the former governor there. In Indiana, teachers do not have the right to strike. However, not unlike Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Kentucky, there is an understanding that there's not much the state government can do if they do strike. They can't afford to fire them and rehire all sorts of teachers. In fact, in Indiana, there is a big shortage of teachers. You know, we always hear that the real problem with teachers is that the unions won't let their teachers be fired. As if there's this big, long line of people who are looking to be underpaid after getting highly educated and working in crappy conditions with very little support, and then also demonization. In Indiana, over the past, now they're 31st in the country with teacher pay. So that's around $50,000 a year. In the year 2000, the average Indiana teacher salary was $59,000, almost $60,000. $60,000. And 17 years later, it is now $50,000. That's just shocking.
It's a lot of belt tightening.
That's a lot of belt tightening, and add in the inflation rate there, and they've almost suffered basically a 20 to 25% decrease in their salaries. So, and on top of that, they're getting charged more for their health insurance. So in Indiana right now, there is talk of another strike. They're watching what's going on across the country, and I guess we'll see where this leads. But there's been, this movement that is happening with teachers across the country is rolling on. And there was a story today, I guess it was in The Intercept. It was yesterday, about bus drivers in Georgia. And this was on Thursday, I believe, of last week, when Arizona school workers, teachers, voted in favor of a walkout. 400 school bus drivers in DeKalb County, Georgia, stayed home from work, staging a sick out. And the real question is going to be if there can be solidarity between teachers and support workers at schools, because teachers have a lot more power, basically because of their relationships, I think, with parents, than folks like bus drivers or janitorial staff. On Friday last week, 25% of bus drivers refused to show up for work. The sick out may continue through today. The school district leadership in DeKalb County has offered no such solidarity in terms of like school boards and superintendents with the school bus drivers. In fact, last Thursday, 7 of them were fired as sick out ringleaders. So the big question is whether or not this solidarity is going to jump across the vocational lines that we see in a school. And I think that's going to be very telling as to just how broad this movement can go from teachers.
It seems pretty encouraging so far.
I mean, certainly from teachers to teachers and state to state, it's pretty impressive. And it's also, the question's going to be, within the schools, how much solidarity will there be between teachers and folks like bus drivers? And then also, how many other public sector workers are going to follow this model in states where they don't have the right to strike? Because it seems to me there's a whole host of different professions that are very difficult, if there is this type of solidarity, to replace quickly. Now, they don't have the same necessarily constituency that teachers have, because again, teachers are well positioned to develop relationships with the community because literally the parents want to talk to them every day. But we'll see. It is encouraging.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everyone, when you say they don't have the right to strike, they're not legally allowed to strike, but we all have the right to strike whenever we decide to.
Of course.
The rights are what we take for ourselves at the end of the day.
I should say they don't necessarily have the right to maintain their jobs under current law. Yes. Or that right is not fully recognized in these states. Let's put it that way. There are statutory protections in some states that there aren't in others. But yes, your point is taken. And they're basically learning that it's fairly effective, which is good news. I mean, we start to work your way up from 35, 35th in the country. I mean, the further up the chain we go, the better off we are in terms of education. But just the idea that 17 years later, you're making 15% in real dollars, not even real dollars, not even inflation adjusted dollars at that point. Plus, your healthcare costs have gone up.
What did the Dow do in that time, though?
Much better.
Well, I think this once again shows the contradictions inherent within neoliberalism, right? Because, earlier versions of capitalism understood that we need people, we need workers, we need people to have kids, and you need to educate those kids. And, there was a certain level of social support for that. And now, guess what? Like, people are being squeezed, and birth rates are already dropping, I think, since the financial crisis. Haven't fully recovered. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Reproduction's going to be a problem.
No
Is that
one
what you're
left
saying?
to, work in your crappy jobs.
I mean, certainly in Indiana, apparently they can't get teachers, and I guess part of that reason might be because at this rate, in another 15, 20 years, they're going to be making half what they made 40 years earlier. It's pretty stunning. Lastly, let's talk about somebody who is doing significantly better than he did 15 years ago. Sean Hannity. Apparently, he makes $36 million a year. Were you aware of that?
Is it 36? I heard 27.
I heard 27, but in this piece, it says that he makes substantially more than that.
He's proving his value every day.
$36 million a year for television. I don't know if that's like a combo of him on
it's
radio.
More than LeBron James makes for playing basketball.
It's a lot, but he's not sitting on his duff. No, apparently, according to records studied by The Guardian, Hannity has a group of shell companies that he's established that have spent at least $90 million on more than 870 homes in 7 states over the past decade. Dozens of the properties were bought at a huge discount in 2013 after banks foreclosed on their previous owners. So at least somebody came out well with this whole mortgage crisis. Hannity sharply criticized Obama for the U.S. foreclosure rate. Apparently, he's got 2 apartment complexes in Georgia he bought in 2014 for $22 million. The developments are in the cities of Perry and Brunswick, and they have higher poverty rates and lower median incomes than the average. 1 and 2 bedroom units in Hannity's apartment complexes are available for rent for $735 to $1,065 a month, according to brochures. They were funded with mortgages for $17.9 million that Hannity obtained with help from HUD, which insured the loans under a program created as part of the National Housing Act. Now, I think the stories don't go into detail about this, but I have heard of programs where you get federal subsidies to create low-income housing that the federal government then subsidizes. And then after a certain period of time, you can get market rates for them. The loans were first guaranteed under the Obama administration and then were increased by $5 million with renewed support from Ben Carson's department, who, of course, is a frequent guest on Hannity. That works out pretty well. Now, Ben Carson does have the authority to allow Hannity from 2019 to convert the rental complexes into condominiums for sale. I would like to hear more about this. I'm sure Sean Hannity will reveal any possible conflicts that he has with any of the guests on his program.
I want a TV show where Sean Hannity's a landlord.
This is like Flip That House on a grand scale. How much you want to bet he's whining right now about how he's in the news for whatever reason?
I can't invest in real estate.
I can't make a couple of small deals that involve getting massively subsidized by the federal government.
What happened to American values? Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps with the help of the federal
Pretty good, exactly.
The only thing I have a hard time believing is that Ben Carson was actually competent enough to help him out like that. I feel like that might have just been on like the procedure anyway.
Yeah, I don't know if Ben Carson did, but in the future, it seems like he has the ability. This is the real kicker: is when these things get converted from rental units into sellable units.
Where do I sign?
I mean, there's nothing like getting a huge government-backed loan. $19 million of that 22. Just got to come up with the 3. And you make it $36 million a year. It can't be that hard to save that $3 million, I would imagine. I mean,
and then you pretend
you got
like
listen. You got your rent, right? And you got obviously you got to buy a car, and then cable bill, right? Electric, gas. I would say after that, there's got to be at least $33 million left. You could squeeze out that 3.
But the fun part is when you get to pretend like you built it all yourself.
Exactly. And then go on to talk about how you don't want able-bodied people to get food stamps. These government subsidies. You know, that's the problem, is that you give the $19 million loan to the multimillionaire, and that hammock, that the floor becomes a hammock for them. That's the real problem.
Yeah, just keep on doing stuff like that, and we'll see what happens.
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we will go into the fun half. And apparently there was a white supremacist rally down in Georgia. And, of course, we have footage of the cops roughing up the the counter-protesters who weren't doing anything. And now, of course, you know that there's laws that were established. Because of the KKK, they would wear masks. And, of course, the beauty of those laws is that now they can be used with protesters who are wearing hats.
It's a double-edged sword of free speech.
Exactly. And Chris Kobach, in the wake of being held in contempt of court for disenfranchising people, he's out there yelling at teenagers. We have some Jordan Peterson footage. Was on this guy. Was on
with Bill Maher. Guess what
Bill
they talked
Maher.
about?
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
exactly.
I can't wait.
We'll get to all of this and more. All right, folks, just a reminder, this program relies on you, its members, for its support. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. And as a way of saying thank you, we give you extra content every day. And if you're one of those people who have had a tough financial event or in a tough financial situation, sometimes it's students, sometimes it's folks my age who have to help with an elderly parent, sometimes folks who have lost a job or have been had health situation. Don't hesitate. You don't need to give us the details. Just send an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Say you want the fun half and you don't have the financial means at this moment or at all to do it, and we will hook you up. We will reject no one on financial grounds. So I think your attitude is really bad. Sometimes people, that goes for even like paying people who are paying. Yeah. We've fired a couple of members. We just don't like the attitude.
It's a special club.
That's right. Listen, you can't buy your way into this. I mean, I suppose if somebody came back, I was like, I want a Sam Seder membership.
Where you get to call you and insult you every morning?
No, that's where you actually get to host the show. And
how much would that cost?
Live with my family. Well, I may up it, but it's like for like $1,000 a month. Yeah, enjoy.
Cucknation.org.
I'll be down in the exact
$1,000 a month for the whole month.
Yeah,
or you just get one show a month.
No, you do take over
for just $1,000.
Come in. You got to deal with you guys. They got to do everything. Okay. I'm down in.
I mean, you're gonna get some offers.
I'm down in Cancun. That's where I'm going.
Sounds like a win-win.
I think you should ask for a bit more than $1,000.
Well, maybe I'll up it. I don't know though. That seems like a really good situation for me.
Can't wait to meet our new dad. Your kids are saying the same thing.
Exactly. They have to go and live with the kids. Also, don't forget tomorrow night TMBS. You can see it on our YouTube channel. You can go right now, subscribe at iTunes, and then you won't even have to think about it again. You can just subscribe, and then it'll just show up automatically. Same with Antifada, right? You guys are on
Yes,
iTunes now.
We are now in the iTunes store.
There you go.
Can listen in your podcast app.
You can get more information at Jamie's Patreon at patreon.com/Jamie Peck. Also, you have time. You still have 7 days. JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. 30% off. If you ever wanted to try Just Coffee, now is the time, ladies and gentlemen. You can try all sorts of their blends and whatnot. Get your 5-pound bags. I'm going to get another 5-pound bag, I think, in the next day or two. Yeah, I am. We get 10 pounds of coffee right now.
15 pounds of coffee.
I'm going to bring some home, too.
You're hoarding
though.
it.
Yeah, well, who knows? Who knows?
Prepper Sam.
Who knows? All right, take a quick break. Head into the fun half, 646-257-3920. We are back. Sam Cedar. Fun half of the program, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 267 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey.
Hey.
It's Fran from Philadelphia.
Fran from Philadelphia. What's on your mind?
Hey, just two things I wanted to... Sorry if I cut out for just a hot second here while I get to higher ground. But I'm just responding to two things. One on Friday and when Michael was hosting on Thursday as well. Basically, technocracy and revolution. You guys were about technocracy first. Michael had this great interview with this professor on the history of defense intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this really difficult issue with dealing with, what's going to be a theoretical post-revolutionary technocrat. Is there even a place for that? A place to look for some guidance, I think, goes all the way back to Immanuel Kant, and he had this distinction between the public and private use of reason, and it's kind of I don't fully grasp it myself, but it's essentially public use is kind of like the scholarly reason, whereas private use is mostly that of officials, of elected officials. And that becomes kind of dicey when you have the defense intellectual, because it's, these are people, Kissinger, and he was a scholar in one sense. But then he goes into government. And so it's, where's the line between the public and the private use of reason? And one example to kind of like tease out how to see the difference between the two is that is this kind of vulgar example that Slavoj Žižek uses about like an example of a private use of reason for urban design, let's say, would be when, would be like, let's design spaces with riots in mind, so how would a space be most efficiently channel rioters, into the right place, as opposed to thinking more about what, the kind of deconstructing what is a public space. So it's like private use of reason is when the parameters of the problem are already just laid out, and it's just answering the question. And the sort of infection of defense and private industry in our scholarly fields is an example of this, where more and more it's just like we want the kind of capitalists who are funding research, they just want the questions that they're asking to be answered. They don't want questions to be asked of them. So that's kind of how I think about dealing with technocracy. And the second thing related is about the revolution. You and Jamie had this exchange on I think Friday about kind of being terrified of an armed revolution.
It was Wednesday.
And one thing it was Wednesday. Okay, my time dilation, all that.
Right. Time is dilated.
But but one of the, I want to mention Žižek again. He always says this thing where he makes this joke about how much he hates V for Vendetta, and he's like, I would sell my mother into slavery if I could just see like V for Vendetta part 2. My God. Because it's the day after. What happens the day after? He's a bit of a contrarian, and I think it's worthwhile criticizing him in any way possible. But he doesn't like this kind of fetishization of the revolutionary moment. That will have its place, but what he thinks should keep leftists up at night is what happens the day after. How do we go on? How do we, how does the water get delivered? So,
right.
These very, very kind of vulgar concerns. And yeah, so I just, I don't kind of like directed at Jamie and curious about what she had to say about that.
Yeah, I don't think that was. I mean, Jamie, I'll let Jamie answer it. But my sense of was in that exchange was a function of was a little bit different. Was Ronald Reagan was saying it's one thing to want to focus energy on building a mass movement on the ground that is distinct from electoral politics, but in the nature of our government, something like the Supreme Court is just exclusively a function of, and I don't know if exclusive is maybe overstating it slightly, but more than primarily a function of electoral politics. And they can simply decide abortion is now illegal, and no amount of protest is going to change that reality.
Well, he also he expressed criticism and skepticism of the idea of basically staging revolution against capitalism.
He may have. I mean, I think. I don't know how he articulated that, but I think he said. I mean, I think what I took was more of like, if you don't focus on that electoral, how do you deal with that question of, say, abortion?
I mean, I think it was both.
Go ahead.
Did you?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you just said. I don't disagree with what Slavoj Žižek said. I think it's a fair question to ask the left, right? If we're going to replace capitalism, we hopefully want to replace it with something better and not something worse. And, people are suffering because of capitalism every day. People are dying. But, things could always get worse. So it's a fair question. I think we're pretty far off from there at this point in time. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about it because we're so far away and the left is so beaten down that it's a good chance to regroup, actually, and a good chance to, try a bunch of things at once. That's why I don't think electoral politics are necessarily bad. I'm glad somebody's doing it. I think we have to try a bunch of things, but also be building class power outside of these bureaucratic structures. And also, we talk about this a lot on the latest episode of the Antifada. So perhaps you would enjoy it. I feel like it's a really big question. It's an evergreen question on the left, and we really can't think about it too much. So
I look at this as sort of basically two truths that we basically all can agree on that people want to be prioritized. So there's one that electoral politics won't, in and of itself, won't save us, and I think that's like from Jamie's perspective, I think that's true. And there's also, but if we let, like, say, the fascists just have control of the state right before we're about to hit an eco thing, that could doom us. So, like, we need to play defense and offense in different areas, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we went over a couple articles from Jacobin, one by Vivek Chibber and one by Charlie Post, laying out these different strategies for the U.S. left. And they both agree that the left is, in a low place right now and needs to really build its base among the working class instead of where these little areas it's been consigned to right now, like academia, NGOs. But they disagree on how social change happens both in the medium term and the long term. And Post makes the distinction between ameliorative reforms and ameliorative electoral strategies and oppositional ones. So, I mean, I'm probably trying to have it both ways, but I think we need both. And they don't necessarily conflict with one another, with keeping the horizon in mind.
Yeah, and I'll just leave you with this last kind of positive note. This was my Zizek call. I'll try to limit these to like once a year or something like that.
You.
But
Thank you.
the revolution, by definition, will always be too early. Because if it was at the right time, it, of course, wouldn't be revolutionary. And the other way to think about it is that it kind of will be a failure, but the point is how it will be a failure. We have to fail and fail again, but just fail better the next time.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
So, anyway, thanks so much, folks.
We can learn a lot from the failed revolutions that have come before, I think.
Exactly.
The Russian Revolution, we can learn a lot of lessons from that and other revolutions throughout the world and throughout history. And I also want to remind people, this is something we talked about on the Antifada as well. If you look at the broad span of history, the transition from feudalism to capitalism took hundreds of years and had a lot of false starts. And it was incredibly bloody and terrible. And so that's like setting the bar pretty low for the transition from capitalism to socialism. I would hope that it would be better than that. But I think it's up to all of us to just work super hard and do what we can to see that happen.
Appreciate the call.
Take care.
Bye. Sam's Tinder profile. Can Michael read in his Sam voice? Hey, Cardi B, swipe right. I never thought I'd meet someone who likes Social Security as much as I do. My old kebab. After you rightfully complain about Mara's interview with Peterson, you should play his comments on Starbucks, which were spot on. Also, why is no one else participating in Michael's sick out? Teacher BB. Small point, the decline in average pay could be due to older teachers retiring. That is, it's conceivable. Journey Andrew. On the revolution question, I'm about to start reading and would suggest others do the same. Friedrich Jameson's An American Utopia, which tries to conceptualize a post-capitalist society. Ryan from Ohio. Bill Maher somehow managed to fillet Jordan Peterson more than he did YOLO Minneapolis. All right, let's watch some of this. What do we have? Okay. So here's the first one. Now, look, I get that Jordan Peterson's from Canada, but he seems to certainly have no problem opining and touring all through America, and his prescriptions for the way to fix our gender problems seem to know no international boundaries. But here he is saying something that honestly, is almost childlike in its naivete, but it's really coming from a fully grown adult who is supposedly an intellectual. It's just stupid. And it shows that this guy has an agenda. As much as people it's just, all he's doing is exploring the intellectualism. This is an agenda because no one can be this clueless about American politics to say the things he's about to say here.
About it. I mean, there's all these people in the U.S. who are on the conservative side who are aligned with Trump for all sorts of reasons. And there's all this tension around his presidency and attempts to pull him out of his office for various reasons. And what do you think will happen if that comes to pass? What do you think will happen to these people that have identified with Trump? And how is it that Democratic types, for example, are holding out their hand to say to these conservative types, sort of welcome back into the fold? Because it looks to me, from an outsider's perspective, that your country is polarizing in a way that's not good, and that people are going after Trump. And I understand that. It's not like I don't understand that. But there's all these people that elected him and that are identified with him, and they're not taking this well, And so, well, they're not. They're not. It's not. And you might not think they're very bright and all of that.
Pause it for a second. Okay, I just want to go back here. Okay, so this idea that somehow the Democrats are supposed to hold out their hand to conservatives, a concept which never exists in politics except for in this situation. And the idea that somehow we're uniquely polarized now. In 2000, George Bush won the presidency. The country was so polarized that it had to come down to a single vote on the Supreme Court. That's how polarized the country has been for over 2 decades. But now it's uniquely polarized. It wasn't uniquely polarized when Barack Obama was president, and you literally had a party whose leader in the House was saying it's not my job to not tell a dozen members of my caucus that they can't try and pass a law claiming that the president was not born in America. That was not so unique, the polarization there. The polarization now is unique, and Democrats have to put their hand out to conservatives and do what? That is a fundamental misunderstanding of the political reality on the ground in this country and how politics operate. If the so-called whatever he's calling the Democratic types or whatever that is, activate the same number of people or really just roll back some of the voter suppression laws, frankly, the Democrats are going to win. There is no necessity for them to reach out to conservatives. And not even like, and even that framework is absolutely wrong. The last group of people who you would reach out to who are Trump voters would be conservatives because ideologically there's no way to make that bridge. You might reach out to people who are unaligned ideologically and simply were felt that whatever, Clinton was corrupt or that she was a murderer. Or maybe you would reach out to people who were just felt like they needed some type of change and there was no ideology. But the last group of people that the Democrats need to reach out to and frankly could reach are conservatives. You have to know absolutely nothing about politics in this country to make that statement. But then he's going to go on, and if you just dial it back a little bit, now what he's going to do, he's also showing his hand here. Because now he's projecting onto other people this sort of straw man that like, well, you don't think it's important to reach out to them because they're dumb and this and that. And this is all part of the conservative aggrievement industry that this guy totally feeds off of. The aggrievement of white males who feel like their power in society is being threatened because the traditional hierarchies are being threatened. But let's continue to hear this.
But there's all these people that elected him and that are identified with him, and they're not taking this well, and so, well, they're not. It's not, and, you might not think they're very bright and all of that, and they're backwards and all of those things, but you need to have respect for the rest of your citizens, and if your country isn't going to pull itself.
These people he's talking about, these people, the backwards one, are the ones who literally had a problem with Barack Hussein Obama because he wasn't born in this country. You need to have respect for your other citizens.
If your country isn't going to pull itself apart, and I really see this happening from an outsider's perspective when I come down here, and I lived in the States for a while, and it wasn't like this before.
Pause it. It wasn't like this before? Is that right? When did he live in the States? Was that before the Civil Rights Act? Did he live here before the Civil Rights Act? When black people weren't allowed to share a water fountain? Or was this when Ronald Reagan said that liberalism was a mental disease? When exactly did he live here?
Yeah, back in the day when race didn't matter.
Right. Back in that day where we would look around on a set like this, and we would not see race whatsoever. Oh, because there's all white people here. That's Jordan Peterson. I'm just an outsider. I'm just making an observation that is valid only because of my outsiderism. But it really is completely loaded. What he's doing is I'm making an attempt to make it seem like I don't have an agenda, but I clearly am pushing an agenda. All right, so that's the first clip of Jordan Peterson on, and here is another clip of him basically going on about the same situation, and just in slightly different words, right? Here it is.
People into tribal actors, and
wait, go back a little bit more. Go. This is the start of it? Okay.
People into tribal actors, and that the end result of that is catastrophe.
But weren't you also saying, though, that the left is too worried about offending people?
I think that goes along with...
I will.
Yes,
right.
yes. Well, that goes...
But then on the other hand, when the left, for example, offends people in the political sphere, you're questioning whether that's somehow bad for society writ large.
Well, I'm concerned about. I think that those two issues are. I think that those two issues are somewhat separate. I'm concerned about the dialogue in the United.
This is the international sign for separate. Co-joint is the international rule. I mean, I know that's a little bit petty, but this goes to show how muddled his thinking is. Because Alex Wagner just basically said, you're saying on one hand, the left is always so easily offended. But then you're saying you're offended by the left in the political sphere. Aren't you really isn't this just a way for you always to be aggrieved? Well, no, these are separate issues.
It's kind of like when Milo said no safe spaces before,
Right, no safe spaces.
And
now I can't even go to a bar in Manhattan.
Well, I'm concerned about. I think that those two issues are. I think that those two issues are somewhat separate. I'm concerned about the dialogue in the United States around the presidency, pulling people farther and farther apart. It has nothing to do with the behavior of Trump. I think this is an independent issue. You can say positive or negative
but
things
he's
about
only
Trump
there
as he
because they
might.
support him. You see,
I know.
mean, that's the thing.
But that's the issue. That's the issue. Is they did support him, and
without the circus, he's just a lonely clown.
Yeah.
But he has these people in Congress who are enablers, and this base that it is a cult of personality, not unlike dictatorships we've seen in the past. I mean, he said once, famously, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose any fans.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes.
And he has proved that to be almost true. I mean, we cannot imagine what he would do where they would turn on him, because I don't know what that would be. I don't think it's anything, because whatever it was, he would just say, well, it's fake news.
But okay, so imagine he's impeached, just for the sake of argument.
Impeached or convicted.
Okay, either of those. But it seems to me.
Well, that matters. One, he has to leave.
Yeah, no, it's not an unimportant detail, but it still seems to me
that is Jordan Peterson saying, I don't know the difference of what you're talking about, but that's okay. That's not his, American civics is not his wheelhouse. But go ahead.
But it still seems to me that it leaves you with the problem of what do you do with the disaffected 40% that are going to be very unhappy about this, independent of Trump's behavior.
Kind of like the Sunnis after we kicked over Saddam.
Well, that's a hell of a precedent
ISIS.
to cite.
Yes.
Right.
Wait, wasn't he going into where's the thing where he talks about identity politics? We gotta play the ones that you show me, because I don't. He went on to talk about identity politics, and all right, whatever. Let's just move on.
Sick of hearing that voice.
Well,
anyway.
no, the thing is, though, is that the whole identity politics thing. Let's see if we can find that clip. Didn't we play identity politics? Because the identity politics shtick is such bullshit. And particularly for a guy like that. I mean, first off, the 40%, we don't need to. The way our system works is that there's always 40% who loses. It's just that for the past several decades, it's been 51% have actually lost. I mean, we've seen it in the context of Congress, where you've had over 50% of people voting for Democrats, and Republicans control the House. Where in the last two elections that a Republican president has come into office for the first time, over 50% of the people voted against the Republican, and he becomes president. Why wouldn't you, if you are Jordan Peterson and you are very worried about this dynamic, why wouldn't you worry about the dynamic of what about the 52% or 53% who voted against Trump and he's president? Wouldn't that be more of a concern than the 40%?
A group does not suffer.
I mean, that's the thing, is that there's no rhyme or reason to what he's saying. And the only thing that gives a rudder for his opining about politics, for that matter, is that he knows who his audience is. And it is disaffected conservatives and young people who just have a sense, young white people, young white males, who have a sense that they don't get what their grandparents had or what maybe their older dad had, which was women as chattel, a guaranteed limited pool of competition for anything that they're going for, where large swaths of the population are simply not allowed to participate in the same way, either explicitly or implicitly. And as this changes, people get upset. And here is Jordan Peterson, he is upset about all of this identity politics.
We need to talk to them with more generosity than we do.
I'm confused about how this dovetails with your thesis that the left is too preoccupied with being non-confrontational. Right?
The left is too
well,
preoccupied
just that
with
we
being,
are.
that is
That's
definitely
interesting.
not
Okay,
right.
no, all right.
No, that's
I'm
a good
paraphrasing,
question.
but the idea that liberals, especially intellectuals, are preoccupied with politically correct speech, that they're not.
I see. What,
and yet.
No, they're too preoccupied with identity politics by a large margin, and they tend to categorize everyone by their ethnicity and their sex and their gender, and I think all that does is turn people into tribal actors, and that the end result of that is catastrophe.
But weren't you also?
This is like the classic thing of like, a couple where it's like, you shouldn't scorekeep. You shouldn't scorekeep in your relations with people. You shouldn't scorekeep, okay? That's what's really going on here. Scorekeeping is not healthy to developing a relationship. It's akin to like when people start saying like, hey, how come the rich are getting massive tax cuts and we're getting screwed in terms of services? That's class war. When someone says like you're scorekeeping or you're paying too much attention to like identity, or you're starting a class war, that's an indication that that person is winning that battle. That they don't want you to pay attention to what's going on. Because the people who are paying attention to things like gender or like race are people who have been systemically, and since the founding of this country and prior to that time, in certain circumstances, have been losing at the hands of the guy who says, you're paying too much attention to that. Because when people didn't pay attention to that, when people did not have the voice to say, hey, wait a second, black people should have the right to vote. Hey, wait a second, government shouldn't redline and say we're only going to provide subsidies for housing if you have a covenant where black people are allowed. Or where women said like, I shouldn't be property of my husband. Or I should be able to get a credit card in my own name too. Or I should have the right to vote. Or why is it that in the workplace, we're paid less money? Like, that's when you're starting to bring up all of these differences, and that's the problem with things. Of course, this is so basic as to be a joke. There is one political party in this country that is based on identity politics, where 95 to 90, maybe not over 90% of its supporters are of a single race, and that is the Republican Party.
Kind of reminds me of that Reductors headline, I'm not political, parentheses, because I assume I will retain all of my privileges forever.
Exactly. I don't have to agitate. In fact, we should end politics right now. If you are a billionaire, and you should just basically say like, there should be no more politics. We're fine. Everybody's fine. Like, let's freeze everything now. And that's basically what Jordan Peterson comes out of. All of these people, they come out of this one basic truth, that there are people in society who have never had to have their status in any way threatened or questioned. And now they are feeling threatened or questioned. And in many instances are losing some measure of power. And of course, their response has got to be, stop worrying about those things. Stop scorekeeping. Stop scorekeeping, because they don't want you to find out that you're losing. That's why they don't want the score. They just went at the end of the game like it's fine. Too much identity politics.
Yeah, that's the problem when these self-help people try to get political. Because, like, the advice in a vacuum is fine, you know, like stand up straight, clean your room or whatever. But then when you say that that's the only thing people should be focusing on, that's when you run into problems.
Well, it's not been problematic for him. Don't scorekeep. But if you were, you would find out that his bank account and he's dressing very sharp these days, isn't he?
He is looking a lot better, actually.
Yeah.
His beard's looking very well moisturized.
I was thinking today too, and of his whole, like, the lipstick line. You know that segment where he's like, yeah. It's just how sort of absolutely absurd his argument is, even on its face. I mean, if you put aside the idea that, like, how much in society, both male and female, is ostensibly would be according to him, to attract a mate, right?
Well, we do a lot of things to look more attractive.
Of course.
But it doesn't then follow that, you know, men and women can't work together.
Well, according to him, it would be the slightest of temptation. The idea of, like, I mean, his argument is fundamentally like that of a fundamentalist religious type. I mean, there's a reason why Orthodox Jews, women are, you know, you need to wear a wig, and you need to have your skirt below your knees, and you need to have your blouse below your elbows, because any signs of the flesh are too tempting for the male. And the same with in Islam.
I actually had an unpleasant interaction once in the grocery store when I lived in a Hasidic neighborhood. The lady told me there's lots of men around. You need to put more clothes on.
Exactly, because we have not evolved to the point where men can help themselves, but for their primary directive, which is to go and bang the woman on the head with a big stick and drag her back to the cave. I mean, that's what his argument is. And to argue that this is all too early for our development to have men and women working together. That's basically the argument. It's just, we have not evolved there yet.
Also, I mean,
which is, again, also super convenient if men are the ones at the workplace already. Like, we just haven't evolved to the point where we're going to give women the opportunity to have economic power as well.
We haven't evolved to the point where we can include you in our club yet.
Exactly. I'm sorry.
Maybe next century.
Yes.
I mean, I think
you're so close. Like, in the grand scheme of human evolution, you're so close. But for you personally, may not happen.
There's a lot of people who still think he's right about that whole lipstick and sexual attractiveness thing. So just for those people, you know, there's a lot of sociological reasons behind fashion too, and class reasons. Like, there's all sorts of things fashion signifies.
Also, does he think men don't do things to make themselves more attractive?
Of course. Even if you were to stipulate that the only reason why women put on lipstick is to remind the man of what they would look like during sex, as some way of, like, attracting them and prohibiting them from doing their work at work. Why is that man wearing that $10,000 watch? Or why does he have a fast car? Because this is all to project the archetype of being able to provide for this woman, right? I mean, and so all of these things, like, is that too tempting? Are women able to sort of, like, keep themselves from fawning all over that guy with the Lamborghini?
Why is he wearing them jeans?
Why is he wearing those jeans? What is he? He's projecting that he can work, he can go out and raise food for the family, and he can be a good provider.
I was thinking about his butt in the jeans.
Absurd. It's just absurd. Women are not allowed to have those feelings, Jamie. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We haven't evolved to the point where we can afford to have that.
Forgot.
It is so sad and pathetic. But, you know, look, McDonald's is also a very big restaurant. My understanding is it's not necessarily the best food.
This stuff is not even true by his own Evo Psych bullshit rubric. Like alphas and betas, the place we get that language from, was later found out that's not even true of wolves, that this whole idea was based upon. Like the person who did this study of wolves later retracted it.
True of me, though.
It's stunning. It really is stunning. But it just goes to show if you play towards the most aggrieved, the combination of people who still retain the most wealth and power in our society, as measured in terms of dollars and access to the media narrative. And then you cross-reference that with their own ability to feel self-aggrieved. That is the sweet spot. That's where you make your cash. And it's also nice to have, backing from someone like the Koch brothers. I'm not saying that Peterson does, but certainly guys like Dave Rubin, who's going to be opening for him, does. So, or the Mercers, I guess, in Milo's case. Council of Autumn. Ronald's other concern with revolution was that a coup against capitalism would be bloody. I think anybody concerned with a painful revolution is obviously comfortable enough with the status quo not to already be bloody. Lewis from Texas. Hey, Sam, Ring of Fire isn't working. I log on. It doesn't give me the archive shows. The app, I mean. Okay. I would check the help desk with that. That is not my purview. Passive-aggressive progressive. Hello, I'm having a problem describing the benefits of socialism to my neighbor anyhow. Especially love to hear from you what's in. I would like some assistance, especially from the beauty Jamie and Sam. He's a beauty too, but not Michael. I'm not sure I understand that fully, but...
The benefits of socialism? Is that what they're asking?
Yes.
I mean, where do I begin?
Give the top three.
Oh, God. Okay. The top three. God, that's so hard. You go first.
Well, I would say, broadly speaking, less general insecurity. Like a sense that I, come hell or high water, I will not have to worry about feeding my kids, about educating them, about housing them. I mean, I don't know that I am, my vision of a more socialistic state is where Jamie's at. No, I know it's not, but I mean, for me, as a parent of kids, I would like to not be concerned about, whether or not they're going to be saddled with debt and can get a good higher education. I would like to not be worried about, I've had different times where I've worried about whether or not I would have health insurance. I was on Cobra right before Saul was born, and it was getting crazy. I was out of work for a couple of years. It was a problem. I was seriously concerned about that. These type of things are unnecessary. We are theoretically should have evolved as a society, considering we're the richest in the history of the world, to have its citizens not worry about some of the basic needs to exist. That's what it is for me. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that part. People have a right to food, housing, education, etc. And these ability to get them should not be tied to their success on the labor market. I mean, sort of further on that point, people should find value in themselves just by virtue of being human and by virtue of being themselves, not in relation to their success, again, on a competitive labor market that they don't make the rules for. I mean, it sucks on a very basic level, I think, to have to, slave away at a factory or whatever so that somebody else who adds very little to the mix, by the way, it can get rich off of it and steal your time, steal your creative powers, steal your amazing potential as a human. And people, there's no reason why we have to set society up that way. It's one of any number of states of affairs that could arise and have arisen throughout history. And also, sex would be better under socialism for everyone. So there you go.
There you go. We'll fill in that gap in a bit. How does I don't want to get into it.
Certainly be better for women, but probably for men too. If if everyone's having fun, it kind of creates a positive feedback loop of more and more fun. I'll drop a link in the blog post about how sex was better under socialism.
All right.
There was a New York Times article that was super interesting.
We'll check that out.
Era of the pajama boy is over.
Can you do a content warning before you play the Peterson clip? I don't think my IQ is high enough to handle a conversation between him and Bill Maher. Calling from a 646 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, it's Billy Buckner. How you doing?
Billy Buckner, what's on your mind?
I was going to ask you about the Russian investigation, but really what you just described is the father of 2 young children should probably stand, and that's about as good as you get.
I'm not sure I follow.
Well, I think the way you raised up the level of discourse, talking about worrying about your daughter or your son being able to get an affordable education, not be saddled with it, is a way of abstracting that stuff up while still being in the first person. And I just thought you did a great job.
Oh, well, thank you. But so let's talk about the Russia thing, because I'm worried that they're gonna end up speaking Russian.
Yeah, somebody told me a joke right after that. Obama walks into a bar. He had been around for 20 years, and the bartender. He asked the bartender, "So how things go after Trump got elected?" And the bartender says, "Yeah, it's the same old thing. The economy goes up, goes down, yada yada yada." So he has another drink or two. He wants to settle up at the bar, and he asks the bartender, "How much do I owe you?" And he says 10 rubles.
Nice.
That's it for today, Sammy.
All right, appreciate it. Billy Buckner, ladies. Let's go to 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Oh, excuse me, 971. 971.
Hey, Sam. This is Ethan from Portland, Oregon.
Ethan from Portland, Oregon, our old intern. Ethan,
old
how
intern,
old,
and then,
how old are you now? How old are you?
On even younger.
Yes, how old are you now?
I am 24 now.
Ethan, you have been
So
calling
it's,
this show for almost, 12 years? 14 years?
I have 12 years. I've spent officially now half of my life engaged in politics.
Oh my God!
With questionable effects on my mental health.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope it improves. How? So what's going on?
Yeah, I called for 2 reasons. One, a little faster. Someone called, I think it was last Friday, about community land trusts, and I actually wrote my thesis on community land trusts and can direct you to a couple of people who might be interested in talking to you about their ability to take land out of the speculative market and use it for housing, using it for just allowing people to live without having to worry that suddenly, because the neighborhood's improving, they're going to be kicked out of their house because the rent's risen a huge amount, and they have to move to another area with concentrated poverty, or they're going to lose a farm because massive increases in taxes. It's a really interesting model.
Who do you recommend?
There's a guy named John Emmanuel Davis. He's one of the kind of initiators of the whole movement. He helped literally write the major book on it, and is the main academic, kind of the only academic entirely focused on community land trust right now. He's a really great guy. So I think he would be an interesting person to bring onto your program.
All right, beautiful.
So I can, yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up was that I think that something that isn't explicitly discussed on the show, but there's bits of it appear, especially in the debate between you and Cliff about who we should and should not be bringing onto the programs, and who we should be listening to in their critiques of Trump, and who we should say, hey, you were wrong about everything. Why I'm not going to listen to you now. I'm not going to give you a platform. We're not talking on the left about what we're accepting in our coalition, what positions we will or will not compromise on, and to what degree we will compromise on them.
Right.
I think having a more explicit discussion of like, okay, we'll have people who disagree with us to this extent on guns, but not to, let's legalize rocket launchers or something. We're not going to have them in our coalition.
Right.
Or,
I mean, I
think that having,
in the case of Frum, okay, I mean, these are two. I understand the theory behind talking about it from an issue-based standpoint, but I think like when we're talking about someone like Frum, in my mind, or someone like Bill Kristol, or specific individuals, that they became so representative of not just positions, right? Like, look, John Kerry voted to authorize the invasion of Iraq. And, people can parse as to whether or not what that vote actually meant and this and that. And I voted for John Kerry, and I would have happily had him win the presidency. And so it's not just the support for the war. It was the proximity to the closeness of the proximity to the support of that war, to the rhetoric and the framing of it and the politics around it, which I think, for me, make a guy like Frum so untenable, and Bill Kristol, because he was so closely associated with it. So that's not even a position per se. It is in this instance, it is because so much of our politics is a function of personality that we are. It's why, frankly, I wouldn't want Gina Haspel to be the CIA director. I haven't spent 10 minutes on this program talking about her as a station chief or anything else. I think it's because she was so closely associated with that torture program that it sends the wrong message about what happens the next time. And so that's to me, it's a slightly different argument than who we allow or what issues, where we draw the line in terms of issues within the context of a coalition. That's another good conversation, but it's not the same one in my mind.
I think that you're right that they're slightly different, but I think that there is a certain level of overlap of, the degree to which David Frum or Kristol ideologically believes and is pushing a rhetoric of, international violence, using U.S. military force to impose its will on other countries. I think ideologically they are farther along that spectrum than John Kerry, for example.
Right.
And that's another reason to not bring them onto, any programs and hope that they disappear into the dustbin of history.
Well, let me put it this way. Evan McMullen, right? Like, okay, put aside the CIA stuff, right? Because because much of his expertise is a function of him being a CIA, but he is not as, his politics could be exactly like David Frum's, and I still wouldn't be as uptight about it because he's not David Frum. Like, literally, it's because I have an understanding of like how, maybe on some level, how shallow American politics are, and just the association, it seems to me, gives more license to what happened. And that's, that's not necessarily a function of ideology. It really is just sort of like, how much of a role did you play in a certain event? And how much are you associated, not just in my mind, but in others' minds with that event? And what is the message that we're sending about that event, about that policy, about that that era? And to me, that's what is problematic. Like I say, really, Gina Haspel should have been fired from the CIA, but it hasn't been an issue for me because it's just not, there's probably 20 other Gina Haspels there, but one of them shouldn't be named to be the director of the CIA.
Okay, and then you put that in category of that's more having to do with the events that they have caused. So kind of mixing other examples, it's the difference between if there was someone who was trotting out, I haven't been following anything he's been saying, but I assume that David Frum is at least somewhat, if not massively, in favor of us doing things in Syria. If there's someone who is more charismatic than Frum and is making arguments about involvement in Syria, that person is less of an issue than Frum because of Frum's association with Iraq, would you say?
I would probably not feel that comfortable if I knew who that person was and was advocating as much going into Syria, and particularly if that's what they were known for. You know what I mean? Because you'd be implicitly giving the credibility. I probably would have a problem with that person too. But, I assume that's the case. But it's a double shot, right? It's a 2 for Tuesday with Frum because if he's still just as adamant about the neocon agenda and also representative of the of that era and of axis of evil, where we're still paying the price, in my estimation, for literally that piece of rhetoric. Then that's what it gets to. And like I say, I do think it's a good project what you're talking about. Who is where do we draw the line from an ideological standpoint? But I also think even in that situation, it's tough to make a blanket rules where it doesn't get a little bit gray on the edges, depending on 3 demerits on this side, but 8 chevrons on the other side.
Well, Tucker Carlson's sort of the anti-Frum, and we also think he's completely toxic and won't say anything nice about him either. So I think if you have those conversations about policy, you'll realize like these guys don't align with us much anyway.
Hey, but our democracy is under attack, and that's more important.
That is that's the argument.
Yeah, I think we're answering your question from earlier as to why the many Democrats are still so deranged over Russia.
Yeah. If Frum starts talking about, starts reading Ari Berman's pieces and starts talking about that, then I might consider giving him the time of day once a month.
Right.
Maybe.
Right. If he's like, and on top of this, we also need to secure voting rights, it would impact my perception of just how far he's come along in his reformation.
Do the work, basically.
Yeah.
Appreciate.
And I think that.
All right, go ahead. One last word, Ethan.
All right, I was going to say, I think that something that is important for especially us on the left is remembering, this is all the borders of who we agree with and who we don't, who we accept in coalitions for whatever reason, are gray areas, and we should allow some space for people to actually be able to do the work of reforming their positions. But that doesn't mean instantly saying, "Oh, okay, you agree that Trump is a piece of crap. You are now on our side, and we're listening to you all the time."
Right.
But yeah. All right.
Appreciate the call, Ethan. Always great to hear from you. Thanks for calling, buddy.
Absolutely.
Right.
Talk to you another time.
Ethan used to call in when he was just like a small boy. On
Done a thesis now.
Yeah. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Joshua from San Antonio.
Justin?
Joshua.
Joshua from San Antonio. Hello, Josh.
Hey,
from San
I just wanted to know, or I just wanted to ask, what do you think is going to happen with DACA? DACA. Is it dead?
Oh, to
I
DACA?
know it's still in the courts, but yeah.
I mean, it really sort of depends on how long it's tied up in the courts.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are you? Do you know people who are under that program?
Well, I mean, I am, but I just want to thank you guys, for, always speaking about, immigrant rights and all that stuff. You guys are doing a great job with that.
Well, I mean, how long have you been in this country? Do you mind? Do you feel comfortable talking about it?
For about 13 years.
15 years, and
I've been using Salad.
How old were you when you came to the States?
About 11.
11, and where were you coming from?
It's called Monterrey.
Monterrey.
Just,
I've been there.
Outside of Texas.
Okay.
It's a beautiful city.
And
oh yeah.
Did your folks come looking for work, or what was the deal?
Actually, you know what, Sam? Over there in Mexico, they don't have free education, So you sort of have to pay, kind of like if you want, better education, but you have to pay for your public education over there.
And so
the thing is that I got... Excuse me?
Go ahead. Sorry.
So the thing is that I got kicked out over there, and I couldn't go to school over there. So my folks didn't come with me. I lived over here with my uncle and my aunt.
Wow. Was that hard?
Oh yeah, it was hard, man. But yeah, just the thing that the only thing that I wanted to call for is there's this law in Texas. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's called SB4. And it gives the police, and I guess deputies and sheriffs, it gives them the power to ask people for their, I guess, their legal status, And it's just like it's kind of one of those laws that were like in Arizona and Alabama, And I was just wondering if you guys, would talk about it maybe in like the next show, because I haven't seen any coverage of it, in like mainstream or whatever, or independent outlets, So it'd be nice if you guys could bring some attention to it, because you guys are the voice, pretty much.
All right, we will check it out, SB4. I guess it just was endorsed in a federal court as not being... there was a challenge to it, and it seems like the challenge fails. Senate Bill 4 is lawful, according to the court case. And this court case was, well, I guess just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, or about a month ago. All right, we'll check it out. It's a...
Thanks, man. You guys are awesome.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Hang in there. This is apparently a ban on Texas state ban on sanctuary cities, which would basically mean that first responders and law enforcement are required to, or can be required to check on immigration status, which, has major implications. I don't know about Joshua, but, Joshua is still, at least at the time being, has a temporary reprieve from the courts. But if you're not sure about your immigration status, or you don't want to, or your immigration status, you're undocumented, maybe you've overstayed your visa, whatever it is, and you see a car accident, or you know something about some potential danger to the community, do you? I mean,
Or
are
you're
you
a
going
victim of domestic abuse.
Or you're a victim of domestic abuse? Are you going to go to the cops? Not if you think it's going to get you kicked out of the country. I mean, it's a real problem. It's a real problem. But we will. I will look into that SB4 a little bit more. Speaking about total a-holes, here's a guy who has been admonished by the courts time and time again. Right now, Chris Kobach is in contempt of court because he is illegally preventing people from registering to vote. He has not treated voters who are affected in the ongoing court cases the same as all of the registered voters. He's supposed to pay attorney fees to the ACLU. He's in contempt of court. And here he is, mad because high schoolers don't want to live under threat of being shot when they go to school.
Hey, ho ho! The NRA has got to go! Hey, hey! Ho ho! The NRA has got to go! Hey, hey!
They were talking about how some people were going to have some protests, some students were going to go out and talk about their ideas on public policy, because, you know, when you're 16 years old, you pretty much know everything you need to know.
Pause it. This is a guy who, incidentally, is, again, contempt of court. But, you know, the beauty here is it's always framed as some type of aggrievement, right? Like, how dare these 16-year-olds have any type of say? Like, would he say this about the 18-year-old gets sent off to war? Like the 16-year-old? I mean, it's so offensive to him.
We just want to bring awareness. This issue can't die like it has after every other school shooting, because we can't have a school shooting in our beautiful school, in our beautiful city, in our beautiful country again.
The schools aren't teaching them to make an informed decision. They're indoctrinating them, as far as I'm concerned. That's what I see.
Yeah, pause it. Yeah, they're being indoctrinated. You know what's a great way of indoctrinating kids, students, from being anti-gun? Send in a shooter every now and then. Then they just get indoctrinated. They learn, like, there's no debate.
It's the
just
ultimate
like,
psyop.
I don't like guns that kill people.
And, you know, the school walkouts and the left-wing sponsored rallies, I think they need to be answered, too, because too often the media sees this and says, oh, I guess these are the only people who care about this issue. No, we care about this issue. And I have an idea. Instead of walking out of class, why don't you stay in class and spend that half hour studying the history of the Second Amendment?
Look at all those guys with baseball caps. You know, I wonder what they were studying that day in Parkland. Maybe it was the Second Amendment.
You know what? They should study the history of the Second Amendment, because then they'll find out how tightly associated it was with racism.
Right.
This big league in South Carolina where the whites were outnumbered by their slaves.
Huge.
Big league.
Oh, speaking of the Second Amendment, you know who learned something about the Second Amendment? This guy, James Shaw Jr. Apparently, the suspect, Travis Reinking, came in at about, I guess, like 3 a.m. at a Waffle House with an AR-15 that had been taken away from him, I think, if I'm not mistaken, by Secret Service, and then returned to his dad. And his dad, in the spirit of the Second Amendment, gave it back to him.
It's like when you lose your Frisbee on the roof.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones. I threw my baseball across the bushes into your backyard. Can I please have it back? Here you are, son. Go take it to the Waffle House and shoot 4 people dead. I mean, I got to say, like, this guy is obviously incredibly brave and deserves to be hailed as a hero. But the real story here, and I think there's a certain, like, tendency to sort of, like, focus on the hero here, because You don't want to focus on the part of like, wait, how did this guy get this gun and go in and shoot people dead? But here is James Shaw Jr., 29 years old. Apparently, when the guy was reloading, he jumped him and threw the gun across the, the counter at the Waffle House. And the guy, just, this guy, Ryan King, just got up and walked out, and he's still on the run.
When we first heard what I know now is the gunshot, we thought it was plates crashing because we had pretty much made that up in our minds that it was the plates were going to fall. Then the second one happened, then a third one happened. I think that's when the glass busted and broke through, and then I saw the Waffle House employees scatter. And then I looked back and I saw a person laying on the ground right at the entrance of the door. So then I jumped pretty much and slid from the tabletop to the entrance of the door. And I think he let off some shots through the glass, and then he proceeded to come in. And then when he proceeded to come in, I actually went behind this like a push door, swivel door, and he shot through that door, I'm pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure he grazed my arm. And it was at that time that I kind of made up my mind, because there's no way to lock that door, that if it was going to come down to it, he was going to have to work to kill me. So at the time that he was either reloading or the gun jammed or whatever happened is when I ran through the swivel door. I hit him with the swivel door, and then the gun was kind of jammed up and it was pushed down, so we were scuffling. And I managed to get him with one hand on the gun, and then I grabbed it from him and I threw it over the countertop. And then after that, I was trying to get out the door, and I think he was pretty much in the entranceway, so I just took him out with me out of the entrance and all the way outside. And then I proceeded to run around, and he had like a walk, trot, pace type of jog that he was doing, trying to get away, and that's kind of what happened.
Man, I guess he felt like he was basically trapped. He said, "This is it."
And the amount of luck it takes to be able to have somebody there to take advantage of any kind of moment like that, it's ridiculous that like we expect, like you were saying earlier, like the message is that we can't, like this is a problem, not that there's a hero that can save us from these things.
Yeah, which is not to take away anything from what he's saying. There was an old Lenny Bruce bit, I think it was Lenny Bruce, about Jackie Kennedy, where he read some Time magazine during, after the shooting, that she was trying to like crawl in front of the shooter to protect Kennedy. And he was like, no, she's not. She's trying to get out of the car, which is exactly what she should do. She, like to make it like to tell people that the instinct should be to get in front of a bullet is the wrong thing to tell people. I'm not saying that it just reminds me of this. Like the idea that we should have any type of expectation that someone's going to be able to jump a guy who's come in with an AR-15 and shot 4 people dead is, I think...
They want to train children to do this. That's right. Their answer.
Well, I mean, that's what literally Rick Santorum was saying. Like, why don't they learn CPR and maybe get ninja?
Ben Carson literally said they should rush the shooter.
Right. Some of them they can't shoot all of you.
You do gym class with those fake guns and teach kids how to disarm.
Ninja stars. Like I feel like then the kids could have them all in their pocket. Everybody would have 3 ninja stars, and just like there's some coordinated thing where they all throw the ninja stars.
Yeah, because you'd only need a few to actually hit it.
if you had like 8 kids throwing ninja stars, let's say 4 of them hit their target, and then only 2 of them needs to hit like somewhere like sensitive
in the eye,
and then they jump them. I mean, that's the thing. That's the only way I have like some hesitation about focusing too much on this guy. Not because he's not heroic and incredibly brave, far braver I think than I would be, but just to create in anything that creates some type of expectation that this is actually like a reasonable thing to count on, or something you could expect, or even like 1 in 10 times that this should happen, is just I think it's problematic.
I think it's notable because he is so singular and heroic, and most people wouldn't do that.
Indeed.
And I'm also
and shouldn't.
Yeah. I'm also counting down to when the right wing somehow demonizes this guy for, racial reasons.
Right.
I'm sure they'll find a way.
Oh, they'd be all over. They'd love this guy if he had a gun, though.
Oh, totally. Oh, man. My God.
Yeah, that it would be their get out of racism free forever pass, right?
So down in Georgia, apparently, what better way to spend the weekend than traveling down to sunny Noonan, Georgia? Is it Noonan or Newman? Noonan. And there was a big neo-Nazi rally down there. And, one thing I will say that is quite clear. And, you look at that DSA thing where they basically chant, and the chants had the power of shoving
nonviolent confrontation.
Milo out. But I think
like
it's quite clear. When you look back on last year with Charlottesville and clearly, I don't know, it's hard to sort of disaggregate, from the punching Richard Spencer in the face. It's hard to disaggregate the different tactics, but clearly it worked. I mean, without a doubt, right? Richard Spencer will tell you that he no longer gets bookings anymore. Now, maybe it was just exposing who those people were at Charlottesville by outing their identities.
It turns out the more you expose these guys, the more security guards they need to pay for their appearances.
Maybe that video of Richard Spencer getting punched in the face intimidated people from going out and spreading their Nazi wings.
Probably. And all the doxings, too, that happened after Charlottesville.
That's what I
these
just said.
People
Yeah.
are finally starting to
There's a
realize
price-
they could face consequences.
Right. There's a price to be paid. It's hard to disaggregate which of those tactics worked, but as a whole, it's quite clear they worked. Like all the hand-wringing about that, it worked. We have less emboldened Nazis at this time in this country than we did a year ago. So these things work. And it's nice to see the cops out there, harassing the protesters. Well, at least they're not geared up like they're about to land in some foreign country. Oh, sorry. Let's look at this video from the protesters, or I should say, I guess these are counter-protesters who were wearing any type of mask or bandana. A law passed to basically inhibit the KKK.
State law requires you to remove your masks right now. You will do it right now or you will be arrested. This is your last warning. You can gather and you will be arrested. And you will be arrested. You will be arrested. You must take your mask off right now. This is your last warning.
I mean, this is sort of nuts. Right? Like they're looking for any excuse to arrest these people. They're not doing anything else. Like I can understand it. Like, okay, one of these guys takes a baseball bat and starts banging on some type of statue in the park, and you arrest them and you charge them with wearing the mask on top of it. Right? Like, but to actually say, we're going to initiate a violent confrontation now because you're wearing a bandana here on your face up to your nose as opposed to underneath your neck when it just becomes like a kerchief and a scarf. That seems to me to be bad policing practice. Right here. Serve and protect. These guys just wanted to have a fight. I mean, that's all that's about, right?
What you want? Back up! Get back! Get back! Get back! Put the gun down! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up!
I mean,
Remove your mask!
this is just nuts. Like, I'm surprised somebody didn't get shot in this scenario. But thank God they got the guy with the red bandana around his mouth.
It's like, I already knew this, but it's still shocking watching this video how militarized the police are.
I mean, it's almost shocking to realize that they're police. Like, wait a second, who called the National Guard out?
Got an image of the actual
And here
rally.
is the rally that night where they are, and it's a wonderful pyrotechnic thing where they're saluting a burning swastika. They got to be psyched. Those guys all got to be psyched too. Hip hip hooray for the paramilitary that beat up those protesters.
The mask thing is entirely about surveillance, right?
I mean, the initial reasons for those laws were to prevent basically the KKK from hiding their identity when they would stage these things. From the cops' perspective, like, I guess it is for surveillance if they are afraid that something's going to happen going forward.
Yeah, I mean, these police departments, don't they log all this footage of these protests and basically put it on people's files in towns like this?
Yeah, they do that.
Yes. They certainly do it in New York. I would imagine they do it, I mean, I hate to think that all they have is just all of those automatic weapons and those vests and this and that, and they don't spend any of their money on video cameras.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be a real shame.
Imagine being the police department's AV guy.
Right, exactly. But it seems to me they created the confrontation there where it was just not necessary.
Well, for their ends, it was necessary because they're trying to quell dissent.
Right. What are we going to do? We were just out there. We got the whole machine. We got our big up armored vehicle out there, and the guys were just protesting. We needed to do something.
And it's not because individual cops are bad people, although perhaps they are. I mean, this is what the police do. This is a function that they serve in society.
Let's go to the phones calling from a 917 area code. Who's this?
Is this me?
I think it is. Who is me?
All right. My name is Jay. I'm calling from Brooklyn.
Hello, Jay from Brooklyn. What's on your mind?
Well, there's a few things, but we'll take it in size. First of all, Jimmy Dore. You mentioned something about him the other day, having beef with CNN about him not being a conspiracy theorist in the same league as Alex Jones. I take issue with that.
Wait a second. Okay. So your argument is that Jimmy Dore is in the same league as Alex Jones.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think he is. I think that if he's making up conspiracy theories like that, but my issue with what you said was that he's within the camp, the mainstream left camp, and my argument is that and you had mentioned that because he's for single payer, something like that. That's what you use as an example. And I wanted to say that just because he's for single payer doesn't mean that he's, on the right side of things. Everyone is for single payer outside of the United States. Go to Israel. Israel is currently has the most conservative government they ever had, and they have single payer. They have the most progressive healthcare system, in the world almost.
Well, I see what you're saying. I mean, I guess I was just using that as shorthand. I mean, I think like from his politics, I don't think are outside of are outside of the sort of more or less mainstream left, progressive left. His politics. I mean, I think he has some other issues that seem to be sort of almost like distinct of politics, and his tactics and his strategies are misinformed and sad and mutated in many respects. But are you talking about like just his what? I was talking more about his sort of like ideological beliefs.
Okay.
As I am aware of them. But maybe, but I mean, I'm open to the idea that he also, harbors some other ideas that are, ideologically I would have a problem with. I'm just not aware of them. He has other ideas that I do have a problem with, but.
Okay, so let's take this for example. He was pushing for people not to vote for Hillary, right?
Right.
And look where we ended up. So,
right. That to me, I mean, he would like to claim that it was ideological. I think to me that is really
purist in a sense.
No, it's just bad strategy. I mean, he's so convoluted. If I remember correctly, this was going to lead to Democrats, it was going to empower Democrats, but better Democrats. And to a certain extent, it'll do that, but it's really going to take us back to where we were, it seems to me. But there was no story about how this was going to be ideologically better. It was just like reacting. It was really just like, I'm going to perform a dance and then good things happen.
Right.
I don't know if that's ideological. But maybe we're just parsing words. And I just thought it was a false equivalency to have him into that CNN piece. I didn't mean in any way to offer a broad-based defense of Jimmy Dore in any fashion. So I want to make that clear. But I appreciate the call.
I actually, that was not really my main point. I wanted to say something else.
Really?
I wanted to say that I'm terribly, I'm scared for the midterms. I think that the blue wave is not in the bag. I think Dems have a terrible messaging problem, and now it's even getting worse. We're seeing the generic ballot closing in. And I want to say I've been bombarded with, right-wing ads, left and right. For example, there was a poll that the country trusts Republicans to deal with the deficit better. And, knowing from the data, they just exploded the deficit and stuff like that. I'm just terrified that we're too cocky.
Yes, I think there is no value in people being super confident about anything right now, and I would agree with that. I'm not sure I'm as concerned as you are, but I think that people should function as if it is a highly risky proposition. Appreciate the call. Sorry, I got to jump. I only got we got a bunch of pre-tapes coming up. All right, I got time for one more phone call. Got to be quick, though. Calling from an 863 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Roderick in Texas.
Robert, what's going on in your mind? What's going on?
I travel a lot for work, and I was in Decatur, Alabama. And it was a little weird talking to guys up there about Trump and, while we were sitting on smoke break and everything else. And I was wondering what you might think about, like, if liberals have a true sense of conservatives outside of cities that aren't, like I live in Beaumont, Texas, and it's 50% black, and Southeast Texas as a whole voted for Hillary. And I constantly get in debates with guys at the bar and the pool hall and everything else about the bad stuff that Trump is doing, and they constantly just double down, and I think it's because they're always talking to liberals about about the situation in the country and everything. But when I went to Alabama, it seemed like they didn't have any problem saying that, man, he's fucking up right now, or this dude's an idiot. Yeah, I voted for him. I probably wouldn't vote for him again. Or it's just like it was a lot of guys I ran into like that.
So if I get your drift, you're saying that people who actually have contact with liberals are more defensive and want to defend the president, but people who are in like fully red states don't come across liberals and aren't motivated by the idea of wanting to get under a liberal skin. So they're just like, yeah, this guy's a lunatic. Is that the point you're making?
Yeah. That seemed like that's what I was getting over there for some reason.
It's possible.
They didn't have a problem with saying this dude's an idiot. He is not like. I think I talked to like maybe 15 guys, and I would say over 50% of them had no problem with saying that they voted for him. But the guy's a freaking moron.
That might be a Texas thing.
I heard that a bunch while I was there.
He's saying it was in Alabama.
I mean, I get it. Like, liberals can be the worst. And a lot of people vote for Trump to own the libs. But what we really need, and I want to thank you for this, is people like yourself who aren't fucking smug about it, who don't tie populism with any kind of neoliberal economics, and just like talk to people and slow walk them, because that's how this happens,
I will also say those people also have a problem with Marxists. I would also argue, whether they know what a Marxist is or not. But I appreciate the call.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I think...
Yeah, I mean, Sean talked about this on our show this week where, he's not out as a Marxist in his union, but he has been slowly having these kinds of conversations with people and like, oh, you don't like Trump? What about Hillary? Hillary's bad too. And they're like, yeah. And he's like, oh, what about that Bernie guy? And he's like, very slowly and steadily making inroads with a population that's kind of conservative.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt. I also think that there's a group of people who who it's not a question of how smug the liberal that they run into is. I don't know how smug the people. Remember, I don't know if you remember Chief Kessler, the libtard shooting cop from Pennsylvania. I mean.
That's not the only part, for sure.
No, yes, it is not. I don't think it's the overwhelming. I mean, I remember Christine Todd Whitman saying that the real reason why conservatives couldn't accept climate change was because liberals are so smug about it. I'm sorry. You know what? Christine Todd Whitman, I don't know how smug she is in real life, but... I
mean, I am a hypocrite because I can be quite strident myself when talking to people in real life, but I'm working on it.
Train Boy. I did that. All right. Going to do 10 more of these and we're going to go. Gregory from Oklahoma. Last week I IM'd and said I wanted to started a left-wing news outlet here in Oklahoma. Just wanted to make sure y'all knew I was me saying that. Yes. Also, thank you for sticking up for Jimmy Dore. Thank you for being awesome. I have a question for Jamie. It was okay. Was wanting to ask her if she thinks I could sell libertarian socialism to rural Oklahomans. I'm black, but I'm also pro-gun and pro-worker co-ops.
You could try. You should always try.
Definitely try. Ryan from L.A. Regarding Milo, the sad truth is his numbnut followers will never see the video and will believe he escaped the pub just seconds before being burned alive by a mob of ravening Stalinists.
Don't credit him with too much followers anymore.
Ryan from L.A. When sex is better for women, it is by definition better for men. Sam, some of those guys at the Kobach rally were wearing trucker hats, not baseball hats. Gabe from Chicago. I feel like every time I hear people talk about the effect of gerrymandering on the 2018 election, they miss a massive point. It can backfire. It functions by sapping excess voters from party strongholds to bolster weaker ones, spreading support more efficiently. And if your math is correct, this will equal more seats in office. That means it's an unethical gamble, but far from a perfect cheat. If your math is off or something unexpected happens on a mass scale, like a historically unpopular president, well, okay. If the Democrats get above like a certain threshold, 11, the whole house of cards falls. 11-point spread. The whole house of cards falls. The math being wrong is unlikely in this day and age of computers. But yes. A Square. Sam, echo Brenda's comments. The last few weeks of interviews are just fantastic. Mike, the one on the Origins of Rand Institute on the race takeover in New Jersey. Great ones to connect the dots. These are times, I'm sorry, I can't roll back MR platform to educate the citizenry. People just don't understand how systemic and ongoing this process is. Find the clip about Peterson talking about unintended consequences of the pill. I thought Wagner was going to jump him. This guy is a heel and in the end trying to repackage his right-wing orthodoxy as neo-free thinking. St. Louis socialist, how much of the DNC suit is about saving face? I mean, for anybody at the DNC to say, like, this is going to save our face, like, what? Like, when is this going to be resolved? Like, I have to believe there's some other strategy, or it's just so colossally stupid.
It's more like them putting their money where their mouth is, right?
On some level, it is. Yeah, I think it is. And it's like, this thing's going to get resolved. It's like, it's not like, you know, in the first like couple of weeks, like, we're going to sue you, and they do it and then they back off it. I mean, there's been a lot of cooling down time, right? To think about this, that they're suing it. I feel like there is another agenda here.
Well, it's deflecting criticism going into the future.
But how? Like, what of this, like, with like, where has there been an inkling that this is going to deflect criticism?
Because if these people lost in an unfair fight, then that means that they actually still are legitimate leaders of the party.
So if this gets, all right, I gotta go because I can't do it. I just got a text. But it's conceivable, but it would be the dumbest, like one of the dumbest things that anybody's ever done. That
because of the exposure it invites, right?
Yeah, like everybody's talking about this now, and nobody can think that this is good. There's certainly no commentators out there. There's nobody.
Like I've seen the right say they're excited to go through the DNC's emails or the things that are going to be revealed through this.
Yes, and certainly the DNC must be aware of this as well, right? I mean, fart face. There are enough farts in the human body to fill up 7 water balloons. Thank you. Ziga, talking about DNC and DCCC paid around $1.6 million toward the Clinton On Together super PAC that was created in 2017. Angry modern monetary theorist, my question is related to equality between the sexes. I've talked to many friends. The current theme is women want to marry someone with a higher salary than them, maybe even a higher status. What does that mean for equality? Or am I wrong in my assumption? Well, if it's an assumption, I would try to get some data on that. And the final IM of the day. Would you debate Peter Dow money, Sam? Is that a question? Would you debate Peter Dow for money? I would debate just about anybody for money.
You would do it for free.
I would probably do it for free. I don't know what topic it would be, but I would certainly do it for money. All right, folks. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive